I've been working on my HTCG starter decks ever since I started working on the game over 6 months ago, and they're finally almost done. Right here I have the old versions of the decks, and today I'm going to be showing you all the artwork, formatting, and overall work I went through to upgrade these decks piece by piece into something more playable. I want to start by... hold on. I want to start by taking a look at the art, because before this episode I had 11 more card arts to complete, and by now that number has gone down to just the 4 legendaries: Gruk, Ori, Lelia, and Excelgear. And those ones are going to take a little bit of extra time and effort, because they're some of the most important characters in the game, and I want to take my time and really make sure that they come out as good as I want them to. With that being said, let's take a look at the first card I made for this video, Frantic Search. For this one, I kind of wanted to show that this regime scientist was frantically looking for a crossbow after one of her experiments breached containment. I'm not sure that fully came across in the art, but I'm still pretty happy with how it turned out. The next one I worked on was Salvage, formerly known as Restock. This one I actually remembered to record footage of, so that's nice. For the art, I basically just wanted to show a goblin salvaging dead mutant material, but I kind of left it ambiguous as to what he's doing with it. Maybe he's a regime worker whose job is to dispose of it, or maybe he's a rebel stealing it to study the mutants for weaknesses. Either way, I think the final design turned out pretty fun. After that, I finally got around to doing one of the best tactics in the Rebel deck, Goblin Juice. I honestly liked the simple composition of the original playtest art, so I kind of just kept that and added some more detail. I sketched out a bit of a goblin tavern in the background, complete with some sort of beast head mounted on the wall with a plaque. And for the juice in question, I settled on orange for the color, although I did think about that one for a long time. Next up, we've got the 2 tacticians, Plotting Tactician in the Rebel deck, and Discerning Tactician in the Regime deck. I like the idea of these 2 cards mirroring each other, but I also realized that they were both kind of just goblins holding scrolls, which is a little boring. I ended up keeping Plotting Tactician pretty much the same because I like the pose, but for Discerning Tactician, I figured I'd just scrap the original design in favor of something a little bit more interesting, which is how I ended up with this little guy. His name is Scroll Spitter, and he's a gargoyle that has been enchanted by regime mages to basically function as a printer. I thought this fit pretty well with the ability Discerning Tactician had, so I just kept that the same. I just had to change its name and its type line in order to fit the new card. With those 2 out of the way, there were just 2 more things I wanted to finish. Gash, the only legendary that I had already drawn, still needed a background, and Deathwish, which is the new replacement for Monstrous Rampage, was still without any artwork at all. Since Deathwish is such a strong card, or at least I hope it is, I wanted to try and incorporate a key moment from the story into the artwork. I had this cool idea to draw Lelia, one of the rebel leaders, jumping off the top of the regime fortress with a rope in order to break in through the window. It took me forever to get the pose right, but once I had that, the rest of the drawing kind of went pretty smoothly, and I'm honestly pretty happy with the final version. This drawing will also make my life easier in the future, because now I already have, the basic character design for Lelia for when I draw her final art. Before I could print out the cards, I also needed to reformat all of them so that they had this black border that would help out with cutting. I ran into a lot of issues with the previous versions of the decks, where when I cut them with the paper cutter, I ended up slicing off a large part of the border to where the card itself got messed up. So this should hopefully help with that. Cutting out the cards is always a pretty daunting task, especially when there's 120 of them. But this time it actually went pretty well. There were only a couple minor injuries. Sorry for any Scroll Spitter fans. He'll still be in the deck, he'll just be a little, demented. I should not have tried to cut, 6 cards at the same time. It was a bad idea. Anyway, now I have to get these all into the sleeves, and then I'm going to give you guys a quick deck overview for those of you who aren't familiar with them, and I'll also cover, all the changes for all of you who have watched the rest of the series. And I'm actually just going to go ahead and do the deck summaries now, because once I put the sleeves on, there's going to be a lot of glare since the sleeves are going to be reflecting the light, and it'll just be a lot harder to see the cards. So yeah, let's go ahead and start with the Regime deck. The Regime deck has a very control-oriented game plan, especially throughout the early to mid game, because that's when you're going to be facing the most pressure from your opponent. Basically, you really want to lean into your tactics deck, using cards like Scrappy Strike to get rid of opposing monsters, and keeping a steady stream of cards in your hand with things like Frantic Search. Now of course you're also going to need to play some monsters of your own, and that's where the mutants come in. They're a big theme in the deck, and they all revolve around the scavenge mechanic, which allows them to capture any cards that would into your graveyards during your turn, and use them for some sort of beneficial effect. Take Ravenous Mutant for example. It has an action that boosts its attack by the amount of cards that it has scavenged, and there are a few other mutants scattered throughout the deck that gain other effects from the cards they scavenge. This mechanic is also designed to play into the theme of using lots of tactics in the early game, because when your tactics go to the graveyard after you play them, you can scavenge them with your mutants instead and get those beneficial effects. That's pretty much the main strategy for the deck, but there's one more thing I want to mention, which is combo potential. The most powerful, 2-card combo in this deck has got to be the one I'm calling Lizard Deathwish. I haven't actually pulled it off in-game yet, since Deathwish is a pretty new card, but I know it's going to be sick when it finally happens. It's turn 3, right? And you have a Deathwish and a Break Wallet in your hand. So you tap 3 to play Deathwish, putting the Break Wallet into play, and theoretically, nuke up to 4 of your opponent's monsters if you get the best possible placement. The Rebel deck is a lot more aggressive than the Regime one. Basically, for the earlier game, you just want to overwhelm your opponent with a bunch of monsters as quickly as possible, so that you can start moving them down the board and putting pressure on one of their decks. Really, the main focus is just to make your opponent fear for their life as soon as physically possible, because if you can reduce one of their decks to just a few cards early on, you can limit their options for basically the rest of the game. In order to do that, you're going to use your 1-cost monsters, which are Rebel Recruit and Fuzzmuncher Swarm. And you also have access to a whole host of 2-costs, like Spearbearer and Gruk. In terms of keyword mechanics, the main one is Last Resort, which indicates an ability or condition that isn't active until you have exactly 0 cards in your hand. This is helpful because your aggression in the early game is going to cause you to burn out of cards in your hand pretty quickly, so it's going to be nice to get those extra effects for having no cards in your hand. One of the best combos you can pull off with this deck is Bull Slide. This requires you to have a Clawthorn Bull on board and a Goblin Slide in your hand. Then it's just a matter of positioning your Bull so that it has a good target to slide into, and bam! You can slide into a monster for 4 to 6 damage, and then during combat the Bull's ability will be active and ready to hit that same monster for another 5. I know it sounds a bit convoluted, but if you pull it off correctly, you can kill something like an unstoppable mutant out of nowhere. I hope you enjoyed that little deep dive into the 2 decks. Now I just have to get them sleeved up and they'll be ready to play. But before we end the video, I do have one more big announcement, and that is that I've created a Discord server for GoblinBlitz TCG. I'm planning to try and host an online playtest event there in a couple of weeks, so join with the link in the description so you don't miss out. That's about it for today, so thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.